Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will be discussing the American action thriller film Mojave Diamonds. Spoiler ahead. Watch out and take care. Joe and Danny, two brothers, enjoyed hunting in the wilderness during their free time. After a hunting trip, Joe expressed his disapproval of their brother Roy's behavior, because he was always causing problems and was frequently in and out of jail. Roy's violent acts often stemmed from his career as a professional fighter. However, Danny remained faithful in his belief that Roy would eventually leave his job. Meanwhile, we encounter Roy, who was preparing to participate in a battle arena. In contrast to his brothers, Roy is a relaxed and free-spirited person. Just moments before his fight, Roy engaged in a passionate kiss with his girlfriend, Lisa, even though the guests who would be watching his fight that night had arrived and were waiting for him. But Roy, a former Special Forces soldier, remained confident in his ability to overpower his opponent effortlessly. After successfully knocking out his adversary, Roy returned to his girlfriend for another embrace. However, to his surprise, his opponent had not truly been defeated, and without any regulations governing the match, the situation quickly turned against Roy. From Roy's this behavior, his boss, Julian, who, in turn, ordered his men to apprehend and punish Roy for causing him to suffer a loss of $10 million. Julian, a cruel leader of the mafia, boasted about his undefeated streak spanning 4 years. Believing that Roy's recent performance had suffered due to his attachment with his girlfriend, Julian thought it necessary to lead punishment. Shockingly, Julian proceeded to murder the innocent woman right before Roy's eyes. Subsequently, Julian took Roy to a warehouse where he had hidden valuable diamonds obtained from mining territory. Julian instructed Roy to transport these diamonds to specific destinations referred to as Point A and Point B. If successful completion of this mission promised Roy a payment of $1 million. This tempting offer both intrigued and surprised Roy, as he wondered why Julian assigned him the task when he had numerous heavily armed men at his disposal. Julian then proceeded to disclose his reasoning behind choosing Roy for the mission, citing his exceptional driving skills as a crucial factor. Additionally, Roy's brothers, who had a military background, were seen as potential sources of assistance. Furthermore, Roy had caused Julian significant financial loss. Julian also issued a chilling threat, warning Roy that any refusal to comply would result in the execution of his brother Joe, sister-in-law, and niece. Feeling perplexed, Roy attempted to contact Joe, but Joe, still upset irritation towards Roy, ignored the call. The following day, Danny, an active soldier, grew concerned as he couldn't reach his brother. Danny decided to visit Joe's house, only to find him preoccupied with training his racehorses and taking care of his pets. When the two brothers finally met, Joe revealed that Roy had indeed called him the previous night, but Joe, still frustrated and tired of Roy's behavior, had chosen to ignore the call. Danny expressed remorse over Joe's decision to ignore Roy's call, believing that Roy might be facing trouble and in need of their assistance. Despite Roy often causing difficulties for their family, Danny recognized that he was still their brother and deserved to be treated with kindness. Subsequently, Roy visited Joe's house after his failed attempts to reach him on call. His arrival was greeted warmly by his niece and sister-in-law. Danny, who was also present, approached Joe, who was still occupied with caring for his horses. Danny informed Joe about Roy's presence and expressed his hopes for reconciliation among them as a family. However, well aware of his brother's nature, Joe no longer desired to engage with him, seeing his visits as only prompted by trouble and seeking help. After deciding to depart from Joe's farm, Roy invited Danny to join him for the next few days, and Danny accepted, recognizing that they hadn't spent time together for a considerable period. Before embarking on their journey, Danny asked Roy to provide a clear explanation of their purpose. Roy disclosed that he was caught up in significant trouble. He had been entrusted with the responsibility of transporting a highly valuable item that belonged to a dangerous mob. Consequently, they had to fulfill the conditions set by the mob boss. Following a hard and tiring journey, Roy brought Danny to an underground fighting arena that was operated by one of his knowing. After that, they were captivated by an exhilarating match between two fighters, Barney Boy and the formidable Big Duke. Surprisingly, Big Duke emerged victorious without much resistance from Barney Boy. Encouraged by the outcome, Roy stepped forward to challenge Big Duke, revealing that he had previously defeated the imposing fighter in a freestyle ring. The following day, Roy and Danny continued their journey, set to collect a supply of diamonds and transport them to a designated location. Upon arriving at the diamond storage warehouse, they were greeted by Polly, Julian's trusted associate assigned to guard the facility. Polly explained to Roy that the diamonds had been cleverly concealed within drink bottles to avoid detection by the police. Exhausted from their journey, Roy and Danny made a stop at a convenience store to rest and refill their energy with some food and drinks. Unexpectedly, a group of masked individuals, fully armed, stormed into the store and initiated a robbery. Tragically, one of the storekeepers was killed in the crossfire as the masked group unleashed a merciless barrage of bullets. Unbeknownst to Roy and Danny, the robbers' primary objective was to seize the diamonds they were carrying. Realizing that he was being set up, Roy retaliated by returning fire at the robbers. However, despite his fighting spirit, Roy's efforts proved futile. Determined not to give up, Roy and Danny pursued the robbers by commandeering a car from the store's parking lot. Growing suspicious, Danny confronted Roy, seeking answers about what they are carrying and the identities of the people involved. However, Roy remained silent and maintained his focus on chasing the robbers. The overwhelming number of opponents they faced eventually compelled Roy and Danny to stop their chase. Seizing another opportunity, Danny once again pressed Roy for the truth regarding their loads. With no other choice, Roy finally confessed. He revealed that they were transporting hundreds of diamonds valued at approximately $50 million, which belonged to a ruthless mafia boss. That evening, Julian received a message notifying him that Roy and the diamonds had failed to arrive at the predetermined meeting point. In a fit of rage, Julian accused Roy of playing games with her and intentionally stealing the diamonds. However, a shocking revelation came to light. The robbers who had stolen the diamonds were actually Polly's henchmen. Polly intentionally theft to both acquire the diamonds for himself and frame Roy and Danny as the culprits. With their stolen car rendered useless, Roy and Danny had no choice but to continue their journey on foot towards the city. Roy expressed the urgent need to retrieve the diamonds before Julian's anger grew rapidly to the point of killing Joe's wife and daughter. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Joe, who has just returned from grocery shopping. As he arrived home, he discovered that his daughter and wife had mysteriously disappeared, leaving their whereabouts unknown. Joe's wife and daughter had been kidnapped by Julian as insurance, because Roy had failed to complete his task. Eventually, Roy and Danny arrived at a certain location where they managed to contact Joe, who was still reeling from the sudden disappearance of his wife and daughter. Roy revealed to Joe that Julian was behind their abduction, promising his brother that he would do everything in his power to bring them back safely. Roy then contacted Julian, explaining the true events that had transpired. However, Julian, feeling betrayed by Roy, issued a threat, demanding the return of the diamonds within 48 hours or else he would kill Joe's wife and daughter. Filled with anger and betrayal, Danny chose to leave Roy behind, as he believed Roy had deceived him and put their family in danger. However, after calming himself down, Danny decided to return and support Roy. He was determined to seek revenge against the mobsters for their actions. Unbeknownst to them, two police detectives, Johnson and Garcia, were observing them from a nearby hill. The detectives were investigating Julian and his gang's illicit activities. Meanwhile, Joe was not willing to wait idly. He was resolute in finding his daughter and wife, arming himself and joining Roy and Danny in their pursuit. When he reached their location, overwhelmed by emotions built up over time, Joe erupted and attacked Roy in a burst of anger. Observing from a distance, Johnson and Garcia continued their surveillance, curious to see how events would unfold. Later, Julian sent a photo to Roy, showcasing the captive state of Joe's wife and daughter. Determined to act swiftly, Roy, accompanied by his brothers, headed to Julian's headquarters to rescue their family members. The next day, they arrived at the mafia stronghold under Julian's leadership. Utilizing his formidable skills as a former soldier, Joe swiftly neutralized several guards. With the area secured, Joe and Roy ventured inside to save the hostages, while Danny took up the role of a sniper, ensuring their safety with precise cover fire. A fierce battle ensued not only outside the headquarters but also inside, where tensions rise between Polly and Julian. Polly eventually confessed to being the one who had stolen the diamonds from Roy, motivated by his resentment towards Julian. In truth, the diamond business belonged to Polly's family, and he believed Julian was unworthy of leading it because he is an adopted son. Amidst the chaos outside, Julian took advantage of the distraction to incapacitate Polly. Eventually, Joe and Julian came face to face, their weapons raised, ready for a confrontation. In a surprising turn of events, both Joe and Julian ran out of ammunition, leading them to engage in a barehanded duel. Due to Julian's larger build, he easily overpowered Joe and knocked him down. However, just in the nick of time, Roy rushed to his brother's aid. He aimed his gun at Julian but was shaken by Julian's intimidating yell, allowing Julian to brutally attack Roy. In an unexpected twist, Polly, who had been lying on the floor, regained consciousness and fired his gun at Joe and Julian repeatedly. Believing that he had successfully killed them, Polly ordered his men to capture Roy. Unbeknownst to Polly, Joe had actually survived the gunfire. With no contact with his brothers, Danny made the decision to enter the base. Inside the base, Danny discovered that Joe had survived the gunshot due to wearing a bulletproof vest. Together, they swiftly pursued Polly, who had taken Roy captive. Realizing they needed additional firepower, Danny contacted his military colleague, Jimmy, to request assistance and obtain the necessary weapons to take down the mobsters. Meanwhile, Polly had arrived at a secure location guarded by armed forces, where Joe's daughter and wife were being held as hostages. Polly devised a plan to pit Roy against his best fighter, with the lives of Joe's family hanging in the balance. If Roy emerged victorious, Polly would release them, but if he lost, their lives would not be saved. With the lives of his sister-in-law and niece at stake, Roy had no choice but to confront Paulie's formidable fighter. Despite his exhaustion, Roy valiantly fought against his opponent, enduring brutal attacks and relentless punishment. At the same time, Danny, Joe, and Jimmy had tracked the location using Roy's cell phone and arrived on the scene. Utilizing his sniper skills, Danny skillfully eliminated Paulie's guards with precise headshots. Meanwhile, Roy's determination and unwavering strength allowed him to turn the tide of the fight. With sheer perseverance, he managed to overcome his adversary and defeat Paulie's top fighter. Simultaneously, Joe, Danny, and Jimmy systematically took down Paulie's remaining henchmen one by one, ensuring their own safety and the rescue of Joe's wife and daughter. As Joe cornered Paulie, intending to exact his revenge, the timely arrival of the police prevented him from carrying out the act. Subsequently, FBI agents arrived at the scene and arrested Paulie, dismantling his criminal empire. Agents Johnson and Garcia expressed their gratitude to Joe, Roy, and Danny for their assistance in apprehending the criminals. With the ordeal coming to an end, Joe and Roy's strained relationship began to fix. Roy made the decision to retire from his career as a professional fighter and joined Joe in managing the family ranch, seeking a fresh start and a more peaceful life together. Thank you for watching our recap. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and feel free to explore our other recaps.